Right now, as you're listening to this, a decision is being made in Jamaica that could permanently alter half of our planet. And chances are, you've never heard about it. This isn't happening in a high-tech laboratory or a corporate boardroom in Silicon Valley. It's unfolding in meeting rooms on a small Caribbean island, where a handful of people are deciding the fate of the largest ecosystem on Earth. The deep ocean floor, an area covering more territory than all the continents combined. What they're fighting over sounds almost unbelievable. Imagine rocks the size of potatoes, scattered across an underwater plain the size of Europe, growing so slowly that a single stone takes longer to form than the entire history of human civilization. These aren't ordinary rocks. They're treasure, battery metal wrapped in stone. And some of the world's most powerful corporations and governments want them so badly, they're willing to bypass international law to get them. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. We're talking about mining an environment where 90% of the species have never been named, never been studied, and exist nowhere else in the universe. Scientists recently cataloged over 5,000 species in the target mining zone, and nearly all of them were completely unknown to science until just a few years ago. We're about to industrialize a world we've barely begun to understand. This is the story of Jamaica's secret deep-sea gold rush. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why what happens next in Kingston could echo through the next 1,000 years of human history. If you want to stay informed about stories like this that rarely make headlines, hit that subscribe button right now. We're working toward 5,000 subscribers, and your support helps us bring these hidden global issues to light. Let's dive in. To understand why Jamaica sits at the center of this global conflict, we need to talk about an organization most people have never heard of. It's called the International Seabed Authority, or ISA. This United Nations affiliated body operates out of Kingston, Jamaica, and it holds one of the most extraordinary responsibilities ever granted to any institution. It governs the entire ocean floor in international waters. That's roughly 54% of the Earth's surface. For decades, the ISA worked in relative obscurity. Its job was to manage what's legally defined as the common heritage of humankind. Think about that phrase for a moment. The common heritage of humankind. It means the deep ocean belongs to everyone and to no one. It's supposed to benefit all of humanity, not just the richest nations or the most powerful corporations. But something has changed. The ISA has suddenly become ground zero for what some are calling a new gold rush. Except instead of prospectors with pans and pickaxes, we're talking about robotic machines the size of small houses, crawling across the darkest, most remote frontier left on our planet. So what exactly is buried down there that's causing all this commotion? The treasure in question are called polymetallic nodules. If you could hold one in your hand, you'd see something that looks unremarkable. A dark, lumpy rock, roughly the size and shape of a potato. Some people say they look like burnt cookies scattered across the ocean floor, but don't let their appearance fool you. These nodules are geological miracles. They form through a process so slow it defies comprehension. Dissolved metals in seawater gradually precipitate around a tiny core, maybe a shark tooth or a fragment of shell, layer by microscopic layer. The growth rate, between 2 and 20 millimeters every million years. To put that in perspective, the nodules we're planning to mine started forming before the first humans walked upright. Some of them predate the dinosaurs. What makes them so valuable is what's inside. These rocks contain 4 critical metals: manganese, nickel, copper, and the real prize, cobalt. These are the exact materials we need to build the technologies meant to save us from climate catastrophe. Electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, solar panel systems. The green energy revolution runs on these metals. And here's where the story gets its hook. Mining these metals on land comes with serious problems. Toxic pollution, habitat destruction, dangerous working conditions, and political conflicts in unstable regions. Companies pushing for deep-sea mining argue they're offering a cleaner, more ethical alternative. They paint a picture of surgical precision, robots gently collecting nodules from an empty wasteland where nothing really lives anyway. But is the deep ocean really empty? Is it really a wasteland? That question is at the heart of this entire controversy. The grand prize location is called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. It's an abyssal plain stretching between Hawaii and Mexico, sitting 4,000 to 6,000 meters below the surface. That's deep enough to swallow Mount Fuji with room to spare. Down there, in permanent darkness, under pressures that would instantly crush a human body, lies an estimated 6 million square kilometers carpeted with trillions of these metal-rich nodules. One mining company, the Metals Company, claims its licensed areas alone contain enough critical metals to build batteries for 280 million electric vehicles. That's roughly equivalent to the entire passenger car fleet of the United States. We're talking about mineral wealth measured not in billions, but in trillions of dollars. For years, this treasure was simply too difficult and too expensive to reach. The technology didn't exist. The market demand wasn't strong enough. But two things have changed. First, we've developed sophisticated deep-sea robotics that can operate at these crushing depths. Second, the explosive growth of electric vehicles and renewable energy has created unprecedented demand for battery metals. What was once science fiction is now engineering reality. The gold rush isn't coming. It's already here, waiting for permission to start. So how would this actually work? The mining plan is brutally straightforward, and when you hear it described, you'll understand why scientists are sounding alarm bells. Picture a machine roughly the size of a combine harvester, but built to withstand pressures found at the bottom of the ocean. This collector robot crawls across the seafloor at about the speed you walk, around ½ kilometer per hour. As it moves, it uses powerful suction to vacuum up everything in its path. The top 4 inches of the seabed, nodules, sediment, and every living creature that calls that ancient habitat home. The collected material is then pumped up through a riser pipe, stretching several kilometers from the ocean floor to a surface vessel. Think of it like a massive industrial vacuum cleaner, hose connecting the abyss to a ship floating above. On the vessel, the slurry is processed. The nodules are separated and kept. Everything else, the sediment, the pulverized remains of deep-sea life, all of it becomes waste. And that waste, it's pumped back into the ocean, creating massive plumes of sediment that drift with the currents for hundreds of kilometers. This isn't a small-scale operation. To be economically viable, these mining operations would need to run continuously, 24 hours a day, processing thousands of tons of seafloor material. We're talking about industrial-scale strip mining in one of the most fragile ecosystems on the planet. Remember that organization we talked about earlier. The ISA is supposed to be the referee here, the guardian protecting the deep ocean while also organizing potential mining operations. It's a dual mandate that some critics say is like asking the same agency to both promote oil drilling and protect endangered species. A built-in conflict of interest. For more than a decade, the ISA's 169 member nations have been negotiating what's called the Mining Code. Think of it as the rulebook that would govern deep-sea mining, the environmental standards that companies would have to follow. But here's the problem. The negotiations have been stuck. Many countries and scientists argue we simply don't know enough about the deep ocean to write safe rules. How do you protect an ecosystem when you've barely studied it? Then in 2021, something dramatic happened. Nauru, a tiny Pacific island nation with a population smaller than most universities, triggered what's known as the 2-year rule. By sponsoring a subsidiary of the Metals Company and invoking this obscure legal provision, Nauru essentially forced the ISA's hand. The clock started ticking. Either finalize the mining rules within 2 years, or be legally obligated to consider mining applications anyway. That deadline passed in July 2023. A follow-up target to complete the code by 2025 also came and went during meetings last July. The mining code still isn't finished. The environmental protections still aren't in place. But technically, mining companies could now apply for commercial licenses. Imagine that. The lock on the gate might be broken. The Guardian isn't sure if they're allowed to say no anymore. This brings us to the heart of the controversy, the question that has scientists from around the world desperately trying to get your attention. At what cost? What's the true price of these metals? For decades, marine biologists have been exploring the deep sea, and what they've discovered has fundamentally changed how we understand life on Earth. The deep ocean isn't the barren, lifeless desert that mining companies sometimes describe. It's teeming with life. Strange, beautiful, and incredibly fragile life. Remember those 5,000 species scientists cataloged in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone? Nearly 90% of them had never been seen before. We're talking about transparent sea cucumbers, pink sea pigs, delicate glass sponges, creatures that look like they belong in science fiction. Two new species, named Caymanistella Persephone and Caymanistella Hades after Greek underworld deities, were just discovered in 2025. And these are just the larger animals we can see. The microscopic life, the bacteria, the tiny organisms that might hold secrets to everything from medicine to climate regulation, we've barely scratched the surface. Here's what keeps scientists up at night. Those polymetallic nodules aren't just sitting on dead rock. They are the habitat. They're like apartment buildings in a city of mud. Countless species attach to them, hide beneath them, feed on the microorganisms growing on their surfaces. Remove the nodules and you don't just take rocks. You demolish the entire neighborhood. And it gets worse. Remember how slowly these nodules grow. A few millimeters every million years. Scientists have studied areas where experimental mining tracks were made decades ago. In some locations, mining tracks laid down 44 years ago are still visible, still largely lifeless. Some assemblages have shown recovery, but other studies found that 26 years after experimental disturbance, certain species still hadn't returned. We're potentially talking about damage that lasts longer than recorded human history. The mining machines would also create something called sediment plumes. As the collectors vacuum up the seafloor, and as waste is discharged back into the water, they generate massive clouds of fine particles. These clouds don't just settle back down neatly. They drift. Currents carry them for hundreds of kilometers, spreading across vast areas of the ocean floor like a suffocating blanket. Imagine you're a deep-sea coral or sponge that feeds by filtering tiny particles from the water. Suddenly, you're engulfed in a storm of sediment. It clogs your feeding structures, blocks out what little light penetrates from above, smothers everything it touches. Areas far beyond the actual mining sites could be transformed from vibrant ecosystems into biological deserts. There's another layer to this that most people don't consider. The deep ocean plays a crucial role in regulating our planet's climate. It's one of Earth's largest carbon sinks. When organisms die near the surface, they sink to the bottom, taking carbon with them where it can be locked away for centuries. This process, called the biological carbon pump, is part of what keeps our atmosphere balanced. Large-scale disruption of the seafloor could interfere with this system in ways we don't fully understand. In our rush to mine metals for green technology, we might be undermining one of the planet's most important natural climate regulators. It's a terrible irony, destroying one part of the Earth's environmental system to save another. And then there's noise. The deep ocean isn't silent. It's filled with the sounds of life. Whales singing across vast distances, dolphins echolocating, fish communicating in frequencies we're only beginning to detect. Into this acoustic environment, we're planning to introduce industrial machinery. Grinding, humming, clanking, 24 hours a day. Marine mammals that rely on sound to navigate, find food, and communicate could find their world suddenly uninhabitable. The weight of concern among scientists is hard to overstate. More than 950 marine science and policy experts have signed statements calling for a pause on deep-sea mining. They're not saying never. They're saying not yet. Not until we understand what we're doing. As of mid-2025, 38 governments have also called for a moratorium, a precautionary pause, or an outright ban. These aren't radical environmental activists. These are sovereign nations looking at the evidence and saying this is too risky. The simple truth is that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own ocean floor, and we're planning to start industrial mining there anyway. Which brings us back to Jamaica, where the story has taken a dramatic and controversial turn. While the world debates the mining code in Kingston, someone decided to stop waiting. In early 2025, the United States made a move that shocked the international community. An executive order was signed to fast-track deep-sea mining under American law, creating a pathway for companies to operate outside the ISA framework. Here's the twist. The United States isn't even a member of the ISA because it never ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And yet, it's now claiming the authority to regulate deep-sea mining in areas that are supposed to be governed as the common heritage of humankind. The Metals Company, which had been waiting for the ISA to finalize its rules, immediately seized this opportunity. The company announced it had applied for mining licenses directly through the United States government, effectively attempting to bypass the international system entirely. The reaction in Jamaica was swift and fierce. Representatives from the African group and other member states condemned the move as a flagrant violation of international law. The ISA Council launched a formal investigation in July 2025. The Metals Company now faces the possibility of having its existing exploration contracts suspended or even terminated. This isn't just a legal squabble. It's a fundamental challenge to the principle that some parts of Earth belong to everyone. If one powerful nation can simply ignore international governance and claim resources meant for all humanity, what message does that send? It transforms the question from should we mine the deep sea to who gets to decide and who gets the profits. There's also been a subtle but significant shift in how deep-sea mining is being justified. The conversation has evolved beyond green energy. Recent policy documents increasingly emphasize the strategic military importance of these minerals, particularly in the context of competition with China. Battery metals aren't just for electric cars anymore. They're for defense systems, military communications, advanced weapons. The Green Revolution narrative is sharing space with national security arguments. The world is watching what happens next in Kingston. Will the ISA maintain its authority as the guardian of the deep? Will international law prevail, or will the most powerful simply take what they want? The next major session is scheduled for March 2026. That's when member states will once again gather to decide the fate of half our planet. So here we are, standing at a crossroads that most people don't even know exists. We have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Is this necessary? Do we really need to mine the deep sea, or is there another way? Many experts are arguing that the choice being presented is a false one. We're being told we have to sacrifice the deep ocean to save the climate on land. But what if that's not true? What if there are alternatives we're not seriously considering? Better recycling technology could dramatically reduce our need for new raw materials. Right now, we're embarrassingly bad at recycling electronics and batteries. Improving those systems could provide a steady supply of metals without touching the ocean floor. New battery technologies are in development that use more abundant, less problematic materials. Sodium-ion batteries, solid-state batteries, innovations that could reduce or eliminate our dependence on cobalt and nickel. A fundamental shift toward a circular economy, where products are designed to be repaired, reused, and recycled rather than thrown away, could transform our relationship with resources entirely. And here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. Do we really need to replace every gasoline car with an electric car? Or could we also invest in better public transportation, walkable cities, and reduced consumption? The solutions to climate change don't have to look exactly like our current lifestyle, just with green technology swapped in. The mining companies will tell you these alternatives aren't enough, that demand is too high, that we need every source of metals we can find. But it's worth asking who benefits from that narrative. Follow the money. Who profits if deep-sea mining moves forward? The secret is out now. What was once an obscure bureaucratic process in Jamaica has become a global flashpoint. The meetings in Kingston are no longer just diplomatic proceedings. They're a battle for the future, not just of the ocean, but of how we make decisions as a species. Will we be remembered as the generation that plundered the last great wilderness for short-term convenience? Or will we be the ones who had the wisdom to pause, to study, to understand before we act? Because here's the thing about the deep sea. Once we destroy it, it's gone. Not gone for a few years, not gone for a generation. Gone for longer than human civilization has existed. Those nodules took millions of years to form. The ecosystems built around them developed over timescales we can barely comprehend. We can't undo this. We can't put it back. Right now, in meeting rooms in Jamaica, decisions are being made that will echo through the next millennium. And most of the world doesn't even know it's happening. This isn't some abstract problem for future generations to deal with. This is happening now. The applications could be filed at any moment. The machines are built and ready. The companies are positioning themselves. The only thing standing between the deep ocean and industrial mining is awareness and political will. So what can you do? Start by being informed. Share this story. The decisions being made in Kingston shouldn't happen in the shadows. These are choices that will affect the entire planet, and they should be made with everyone watching. Learn about the companies pushing for mining and the countries calling for a pause. Understand who's on which side and why. Major environmental organizations like the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition are tracking these developments and providing regular updates. Corporate pressure can make a real difference. Companies like BMW, Volvo, Google, Samsung, and others have already pledged not to use deep-sea minerals in their products. When consumers and shareholders demand responsible sourcing, corporations listen. Ask the brands you support where they stand on deep-sea mining. Contact your government representatives. If you live in a country that's part of the ISA, your government has a vote in these decisions. Let them know you're paying attention. Let them know you care about the future of the ocean. The question we need to ask ourselves, individually and collectively, is this. Is our demand for new technology worth the permanent destruction of a world we're only just beginning to discover? Is convenience worth obliterating ecosystems that have existed since before humans walked the earth? Jamaica holds the keys to a treasure chest at the bottom of the ocean. But unlike the fairy tales, this treasure comes with a curse. Once we open it, we can never close it again. The gold rush is real. The machines are ready. The only question left is whether we have the wisdom to say not yet or the courage to say not ever. The fate of the largest ecosystem on Earth is being decided right now in Kingston, Jamaica. And now, at least, you know it's happening. What we do with that knowledge is up to us. Thanks for watching. If this story opened your eyes to something you didn't know was happening, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing these hidden global issues to light. The ocean doesn't have a voice in those meeting rooms in Jamaica. But we do. Let's make sure it's heard.